Hey guys, the other day I was working on a Volvo 240 station wagon for a friend of mine. We were talking about the reliability of the car, and it started to make me wonder, if I were to buy a used car, what is the most reliable engine that I could find? So I came up with 5 different engines. Now remember, some of this is fact and some of this is just my opinion, okay? First off, I have the LS motor. It's like the old Chevy 350 of today. You know, you had a 5.3 liter, you had a 5.7 liter, and you had a 6 liter. The 6 liters are usually in trucks and vans. The 5.7 liters were in things like Camaros, Firebirds, and GTOs. Well, one of the things that make that motor great is it's very modular, and people, as you know, put them in everything. Ford, Chevys, and Dodges. They're just a big application. You can go to a specific car show. It's called LS Fest, and it really is any car you can imagine that somebody has swapped in an LS motor. Japanese cars like the Toyota Supras and the Honda Accords, people have put LS motors in. If it's a car, and it's possible, trust me, someone has done it. The only problem with those motors is the 5.3s have a cylinder deactivation that causes fouling of the spark plugs. My boss had a Chevy pickup, a newer one, with a 5.3. Same issues, and I replaced the plug for cylinder 1 multiple times because it would become fouled in gasoline and it would cause the truck to miss. All right, the next one we have is the Honda D-Series motors. They made those for a really, really long time. They didn't put out much power, maybe 115, but they do lend themselves to modifications pretty easily. The only downside is, now here's a positive. They'll go 250,000 miles, but you'll start to have cylinder compression issues and spark plugs fouling. But with just a little bit of work, you can fix that. These motors, as I said, they'll go 250, 300,000 miles, but it's really hard to break something that only makes 115 horsepower. You just have to get used to being in traffic, thinking ahead about when to change lanes or accelerate past somebody. All right, let's see here. Next, I have the 1.8 liters motors that Toyota put in cars like the Toyota Corolla, the Toyota Matrix. They were also in the Pontiac Vibe. In a previous video, I described how those brands merged together for a little while. The 1.8s are really good motors. They're really underpowered like the Honda D-Series motors, but I've seen them in salvage yards with like 300,000 miles on them. You just have to take care of them. My friend Matt and my nephew both have a certain generation. Matt's was an 03 and Aaron Wyatt's is an 05. They're really good motors, but they have similar problems, so I know that that's something to look for. They tend to eat coil packs and then end up running on 3 cylinders. Valve cover gaskets will start to leak. But those are really minor things considering that you can get 300,000 miles out of a car. I think you maybe could get 175 out of an AC compressor. Well, they do tend at about 200,000 miles to start burning oil, and you have to check that because it can start to consume quite a bit of oil. Well, the other problem with that is when it consumes oil and it's burning off oil, that oil is going through your catalytic converter, which then will ruin your catalytic converter. And my friend Matt replaced his and some exhaust on his 03, and it ended up being like $1,500. So when you're looking for one, look for a little bit lower miles, but just know that as long as you just do the basic maintenance like oil and filter, you can get it up to 250, 300,000 miles. All right, the next one is the Volvo red block B230 engines. Those would have been the engines in the Volvo 240, the Volvo 740, and the Volvo 940. These are the non-turbo motors. They started making the B selection for motors in the early 60s, but the reason why I say the B230 is because in 1985, when that motor debuted, they started to get fuel injection right. Because in the 80s, everybody was trying anything they could get to make fuel injection work. Well, the fuel injection from 85 till about 96, when the Volvo 940 they ceased production, they were just really, really robust motors. They only made, I'd say about 114, 115 horsepower, a lot like those D-series motors, but they didn't get as good a gas mileage as the D-series motor, kind of an older architecture. But they last forever. When I mean forever, 500, 600, 700,000 miles with routine maintenance without even having to have the motor gone through. My Volvo, before we did the motor swap, was a 2.3 red block motor, non-turbo, and I managed to drive that 320,000 miles. And had I not done the motor swap, the motor was fine. I could have kept going. Now, does that mean that there weren't leaks? Of course there were leaks. There was 320,000 miles on the car. But every time you started it, it got you where you needed to go. And it started out feeling like 114 horsepower. And with 300,000 miles on it, it felt like 114 horsepower. So I would say if you could find an older Volvo, they're rear wheel drive, so there is that you have to think about. But if you could find an older Volvo with lower miles, that will go forever and ever and ever. The only downside, I would say, to those motors is that finding parts is getting harder. My 85 had a 1 year only knock sensor. So you can imagine a Swedish car with a 1 year only knock sensor, how hard that was to find. Salvage yards, it's getting harder and harder to find those red block cars in salvage yards because people rack them up to 300, 400,000 miles and then they just ended up getting crushed. So if you're willing to try to have to work harder to find the parts, then I would say it's totally worth it, totally worth it. All right, the last one on my list would be the GM 3800 engine, series 1, 2, or 3. A lot of people know that due to the 90s, I still have some problems with General Motors, but I can't fault them for the 3800 engine. Incredibly robust, lasts an incredible long time. We're talking like 300, 400,000 miles. They're easy to come by. The GM put them in anything. Buick had them, Oldsmobile had them. Very, very few problems, and you'll get one to 300,000 miles. Another great thing, they made so many of them that if you go to the auto parts store, there's a good chance what you need is actually on the shelf. Not to mention that because of the amount of cars they put these motors in, you can go to a salvage yard and find parts easily. That Volvo, you're not going to find parts for. The Honda and the Toyota, you're going to be able to get anything you need for them. You look in a Chevy truck, like a 2500 truck, you'll get parts for that 6-liter LS motor I spoke about. But when it comes to the Volvo, you won't find anything. So if you don't want to look for parts, look for this 3800. You'll find it in many different cars. The only problem with the 3800 motors is that they stopped making them. And that's really not a joke. If they had continued to make that motor, I think that, people would be buying those cars still, but they discontinued the motor. So if you guys are looking for a used vehicle, try to look for these motors in whatever car you buy, because these motors will not let you down. Now, that does not mean that you can buy one of these cars with these motors and not take care of it and it goes forever. They have the old saying that a Toyota or a Honda is an appliance, meaning it's like your refrigerator or your washer and your dryer. You never think about it. You just stick the key in it and it always starts. Well, that might be true in some way, but in reality, if you don't do the maintenance on any one of these motors, sooner or later, you are going to have problems. Some of them will go longer with deferred maintenance, but you still will have problems. So, like I said, when you guys are looking for a car, look for something with an LS motor in it. Look for a Honda with the D-series motor. The 1.8 that Toyota made in the Matrix, the Vibe, and the Corolla. The B230 that was in Volvo from 85 to about 96. Really good motors. You find one with low miles, that's a jackpot. And any 3800 motor, Series 1 through 3, are really, really good motors. Just try to find these motors with less than 150,000 and you'll get 10, 12 years out of them. All right, guys, thanks for watching.